just like record on this computer. One second. Ed, and take it away. I'll let you go from here and introduce our wonderful speakers. And thank you all for joining us.
Great. Well, hopefully people enjoyed some of the networking and met some new friends to connect with. But we're excited now to jump into the longer portion of the session here. James Lewis and Caleb Szubski here, just both have been part of the ecosystem, for a while now. Gosh, I met James years ago. Yeah, I forget where we first met. And they've done a lot of cool things that we're going to jump into with their time at 1110 Innovation Partners. And then they've also got to see the acquisition side of a company going through. And so some stories to stare there. And then just as we were discussing in our small group, hey, what does Atlanta do well? What can Atlanta improve on? I'm sure they've seen a lot and have some good thoughts there to share with the group. So with that, James, Caleb, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Yeah, AT, thanks for having you. Glad to be here. And I actually think, the first time we met, I was working with Cox and we were trying to put together the Techstars program. So
Okay.
we were like building an ecosystem, and you and Atlanta Ventures have always been really the center and the catalyst for that. So it's been a long time.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, hey, maybe just to get going, guys, maybe each of you can just spend, a couple minutes just talking about your background and why did you even get into healthcare in the first place? James, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's kind of funny. We just had this breakout group, and there was so many fascinating stories in the breakout group. I kind of feel like other people are more qualified to be the speaker than me because it's really cool to hear everybody's story. A lot of folks in healthcare have a personal story that drives them into healthcare, and I'm no different from that. So, I grew up a chronic disease patient. I struggled with Crohn's disease all through my teenage years in my early 20s. And really, as I got older, I engaged in my health and wellness and really took charge of my own healthcare journey and used a lot of, some would call them innovative techniques, some would call them alternative techniques. And I was really able to reverse that chronic disease for myself and really improve my quality of life. And in that process, realized that a lot of people don't have that same experience. Healthcare is very fragmented and it operates in silos. And so people who are trying to figure out these holistic answers sometimes struggle to navigate the healthcare system, and it's very daunting. So I was very passionate about healthcare from that angle and always wanted to try and figure out how I could take my skills to make an impact. And then as I mentioned, I worked for the Cox family office here in Atlanta for many years, and they are just a really do good by doing well family, and had the opportunity to help them lead up their healthcare investment thesis. And so I got to learn the business side of healthcare and the investing side of healthcare. And I always like to joke, my passions crossed with something folks were willing to pay me for. And that is really that spark for me that drove me into the journey. So it's great to share my story. And I think the change in healthcare is going to come from the healthcare community of entrepreneurs really thinking about new models. And I hope mine and Caleb's story can be a catalyst for that.
Awesome. Awesome. I love what you said there. Just that passion with something that, you're good at, can do. There's a lot of magical things that can happen when you combine those. So, Caleb, maybe share a little bit about just your background and how you decided to get into healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to meet everyone, and also just echo James's sentiments that even in our breakout, I mean, it was just such a diverse group of folks, and even around the world, which was pretty cool to see. But great to meet you all. Caleb Szubski, EVP and head of our strategy consulting practice at Woven Health Collective. So I oversee the company's strategy, consulting growth, delivery, and client success ultimately. Also have I feel like it's within healthcare, it's an industry where there's usually a personal story too. So my oldest brother is actually mentally disabled. He's about developmentally about 18 months old, but in a 45-year-old body. So he was born without the corpus callosum that connects the two hemispheres of your brain. And so, he lived at home until I was about 13, 14. And so I grew up, helping take care of him in and out of hospitals my entire kind of childhood. And caused me to have I would say a greater passion for really creating and scaling technologies and programs that make healthcare more accessible, accurate, efficient, and really give time back because I saw it personally with myself, how it can impact kind of caregivers and the family around it. And so that's my personal story. I worked at the Cleveland Clinic for several years within the operations space as well as the research space. Got to collaborate pretty closely with Cleveland Clinic Innovations, so taking concepts from inside of Cleveland Clinic out and incubating them, transitioning the IP or partnering with industry. And then I was at Deloitte for another portion of my career within their strategy and ops practice, really focused on corporate and business strategy, digital health transformation, a lot of the themes that were happening in the late kind of 2015 to 2020 time period, which is around kind of automation, and synced up with James about 7, 8 years ago when we created 1110. So great to meet everyone, and look forward to sharing a little bit more about our journey.
Yeah, well, great. Well, with that, I like that transition, Caleb, jumping into 1110. Maybe just to, we'll spend a lot of time talking about that, and then we go into the acquisition side. But just to orient the group, maybe what did 1110 do? What was 1110? And then we'll kind of jump through the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll jump in on that. And Caleb's being modest. He actually knew a lot about healthcare when we joined. So he helped me channel my passions into actually building a business and is really knowledgeable about the value chain. But our mission at 1110 is to make healthcare better by helping companies innovate. We see ourselves as ecosystem builders, and we positioned as a healthcare innovation ecosystem and strategy consulting firm. So, we brought together fragmented sectors of the healthcare system. So, health systems, payers, life science companies, digital health startups, and even parts of the public sector. And our goal was to facilitate connections to co-develop, test, and adopt new technologies and models of care. And so we had a lot of different business models spanning from people paying us to be a part of that ecosystem and participate in events and facilitated discussions, all the way to us building technologies between health systems, payers, and life science companies. So we ended up evolving into a services firm where we sat really in the middle of this multi-party innovation funnel that is so needed in healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, so many things to jump into there that are challenging on the surface of all the different constituents and actually co-developing and commercializing something and getting people to act and change. But yeah, as you were coming up with this idea, like what gave you sort of the nudge? One of the things we talk about with entrepreneurs all the time is like, hey, there's a lot of ideas, but what actually gives you the nudge to go do it? What sort of pushed you over the edge to say, yeah, we're going to go do this?
Yeah. I know Caleb's going to expand on this a bit, but I will say there is actually a science to it, but I'm going to tell everybody in this room that, there was just a point in my career where I wanted to be an entrepreneur, like being very blunt, where I was like, I just want to start a company. I want to own my own destiny and I just want to start. So there was part of that where it's just like, let's get started and meet a lot of people in this industry and figure it out. I shared my personal story, and that was a big spark. We did really look at the market side of things. So I had the privilege of doing a lot of healthcare investments through the Cox family office, where we were investing in companies like Iora Health, which became One Medical, which was acquired by Amazon. And a lot of these companies we were investing in, they were very ambitious, had raised a lot of capital, and wanted to transform the continuum of care. And one question that I always ask people that was really the spark for the business is, would you rather have 100 million more in investment capital, or would you rather have 10 million more, but a guaranteed partnership with Cleveland Clinic or, Elevance or Anthem, or, would you rather have a validation partner that could really take your technology and prove out the economic model and show how it interacted? And what we found is unanimously at a certain point, folks said, we need partners in the other silos of the industry. We need a payer to validate this. We need a health system to validate this. And so we saw this big boom of digital health investment. I mean, in 2021 alone, there was 30 billion invested in digital health, but we weren't seeing that impact downstream. We weren't seeing insurance companies scale that and roll that out. We weren't seeing health systems make these digital tools available to patients. So we really wanted to capitalize on that. We wanted to say, hey, how do we create a program where we can break down that bridge and offer this validation program? And that's what we did. We said, let's bring people together. We didn't know it would become a scalable business. We thought, hey, this might just be an economic development initiative. But as we got more ingrained in these larger organizations, helping them facilitate their innovation, we realized that it wasn't just, hey, how do we bring these people together? It's what should we focus on and how do we activate that? And that's where really Caleb came in, brought his discipline from Deloitte and helped bring this into a scalable business.
Yeah, I might just add on a little bit. Like I think James came from the venture and investing side, where he was thinking about how do you de-risk, and I love I think that's where our kind of shared vision and thesis, foundational thesis came from, of him coming from the venture side with that example he gave in terms of having a validation partner versus more money. And I was coming from a consulting business where I was working with a lot of different larger and middle size and even smaller healthcare companies. And really, I was seeing it both from a validation standpoint, needing a partner there, but also with a go-to-market partner and amplifier, right? There's a lot of times where, you may have the best idea, but if it's not getting out there, it's kind of worthless. And so, when James and I kind of came together, his passion from the venture side and his knowledge there, and my side from the kind of consulting side, we're kind of tackling this from two different angles, and it kind of just came together as an area that we felt like there was a market fit and a product fit with companies that needed help there.
So tell us a little more about that, right? Of like, I see a lot of times like, hey, exactly to what you said, James, like the entrepreneur said, I just need to get into Emory or Cleveland Clinic or whatever, and then that'll open up doors, because otherwise nobody will talk to me, right? But then I also hear from, whether it's the payer side or the hospital side, like I get 10,000 requests a day of people trying to sell me stuff, and there's so much noise, I can't even pay attention to it. As you started talking to these partners, what did they really want to see, and how were you able to deliver it to them in a way that it made them want to lean in and engage?
Yeah. Well, let me take that, Caleb, and then we can kind of talk about that demand-driven innovation. So, the first part, this is a story that, in going through it, when we tell this story, it seems so intentional. But when we were going through it in no way was intentional. It was completely. But we actually first approached Emory because we went to Emory and we had some relationships at Emory, and we basically pitched them a concept where we said, Atlanta should be the center of digital health innovation, and you all should be the foundation of building this ecosystem that both has a physical space as well as access to your healthcare system. And we pitched it like, you all bring in all these grants and all this funding for drug discovery research. Why shouldn't industry bring you dollars to validate and co-develop new technologies? Why should that not be an economic model? And we got, this story was passed around at Emory, and we finally found our internal champion, Dr. Scott Bowden, who is just, very forward-thinking, very innovative. His title's now like VP or Chief Partnerships and Innovation Officer or something like that. But he took us all the way up to the C-suite, and we didn't really have an economic model around this. We were just like, you should do it. We're really passionate about it. It's interesting. And so we ended up designing that program for Emory for free. We ended up saying, we're going to do pro bono work, and we're going to design this for you, and we're going to help you build this ecosystem and capitalize on this digital health boom. But we're going to be some designation. And the designation was like, we're your exclusive service provider for something. I mean, it was completely architected where we were just kind of hanging around the rim. Well, what actually happened is folks started to bring projects that they wanted to do at Emory And naturally, we started to scope those projects to say, hey, you're building a digital health tool for, call it respiratory. Well, we'll get you 5 respiratory docs from Emory, and we'll, bring them in a working session, and they'll help you design your workflows, and they'll help validate the technology, and we'll design a pilot with them. And, we certainly couldn't guarantee they would pilot it, but we were de-risking that process of bringing new products to market. And so at that point, anyone that brought a product or a technology through this ecosystem program at Emory, the Emory Healthcare Innovation Hub, we were right there to be the service provider for everything they needed. And then we scaled across their organizations that way. So, it sounds very intentional that like we did this pro bono work and it led us to other things. But the fact is we were kind of in that test and learn phase of our business, where we were just looking for feedback from folks who found our services valuable, and we found it, and that spark kind of carried us into the scale we got, over the years.
Yeah, I mean, what I would add on to what James just said is, trust, I think is the biggest currency in healthcare. And so, as James mentioned, we definitely had major brands and partners like Emory Healthcare that helped legitimize, people to trust us in the early stages, which I think is an important thing to think about for any entrepreneur. But as you start to kind of think across the healthcare industry, right, each kind of sub industry, whether it's life sciences and pharmaceuticals, med tech, payers, health systems, they do have different things that they're very strong at, or their core, what I call their core, right? But there is this kind of area, and the reason that we really positioned in the innovation space was we felt like that obviously crossed all. And I think when you think about it from like a validation site or a health system, they have data, but their core is delivering care, right? And when you start to kind of pull, unless they have dedicated innovation arms, it's really hard to both do a core and these kind of edge innovation components. But from my experience in the strategy space, if you're a growth company, you need to have a strategy for your core, which is very different than a strategy for your edge and your innovation and areas that might eventually even surpass your core, right? In certain aspects. And so there was this kind of intentionality around really like in the early days, James and I outlining what are the things that are the core for each of the groups, and what are they trying to do with the other group within the healthcare industry. And we were able to essentially speed up or make it easier for folks to interact with the other type of stakeholder. And that slowly or maybe rapidly moved into, as James mentioned, not just a connector and a convener, but really helping them. What we found was people were like, great, you got us a first level conversation with this group, but like, what do we do next? So really that's where our consulting business started to come about, because we really were helping them solve these challenge statements, and like, we'll pay you to help us kind of usher this through. So that's, just adding on to what James said, like that's kind of how it evolved a little bit, but I think there's, we can go a little bit deeper on that too.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, right? Of like the fact, like, hey, you had ideas from all over the place, all different types of fields or focus areas. Probably you had different partners that probably all had different things. What was kind of your framework or filtering process to go through and say, all right, hey, hearing all these things, this is one that makes sense to push to this step and then to the next step. And maybe there's a tangible example you could talk us through of like one idea that kind of went through the whole framework and then from idea out the door to something.
Yeah. Caleb, you want to go first? You want me to?
No, you can go first. I'll add on.
We had two frameworks when we let in. So one was this concept of an innovation roadmap, and one we called demand-driven innovation. And the actual story behind demand-driven innovation, it used to be called demand-driven venture. So I was a research fellow at Emory's Center for Alternative Investments, and I was really, really focused. The year at this point was 2015, 16, 17. And the big trend back then was this corporate VC. Like every corporate needed to have these corporate VC groups, these corporate innovation groups. And so I had done this thesis on, how does corporate VC and corporate innovation de-risk VC investing? Is it a better financial product than that of a actual venture fund? And there's a lot of incentive models you can dig into that. And the concept was all around if you use design thinking principles in your core business and identified opportunities and synergies in the core business, and you religiously invested around getting those synergies, then you could actually de-risk this thesis. And that might be true. I don't know. It sold well. It sold really well, but that evolved into what we called demand-driven innovation, which was basically corporate innovation as a service for our corporates. And so they would hire us, and we would bring this demand-driven innovation methodology into their corporate environment. And it would start with us building that innovation roadmap where we would work with each of their business units. We would define their core business, as Caleb mentioned, and where there was edge opportunities. And then when we do some voice of customer work to understand what innovation meant to those segments. And we would actually deliver that innovation roadmap. And one example that I'm actually, really proud of, one of our early clients was Konica Minolta. And, I'd never heard of them, but apparently they made cameras back in the day and they had a commercial that everybody knows. But they're a fascinating Japanese company. They started, as I said, in cameras, but they got into imaging technology and they ended up acquiring X-ray and advanced medical imaging technologies. And we worked directly with their CEO to put together this innovation roadmap. And the thesis around it was that they were not just going to be an imaging company, they were going to evolve into a precision medicine and diagnostic company. And they actually, using the roadmap, ended up making acquisitions into the genetic testing space where they could bridge not only imaging, but genetic testing. And then we helped them design a program with Emory Healthcare around breast cancer screening, where we worked with Emory Healthcare, Cerner, which was the EMR system at the time, and Konica Minolta, and we actually built a workflow that queried the EMR and funneled people into breast cancer genetic screening exams. And very quickly, we were getting feedback that they were early identifying patients at high risk of cancer that would have prevented it from progressing or doing preventative measures to prevent it from even occurring. So that went from this high level strategy roadmap with the CEO to transform their company to implementing a program at Emory where they were actually funneling patients into a genetic screening program to prevent breast cancer before it ever started. And that's where we started to say, like, this is not just us providing services to a corporate. We are actually putting wins into the system and accelerating the path to those wins. And I'm very, very proud of that. I think we did a really, really good job for how young our company was. So yeah.
I can provide two other quick examples. One was actually in the obesity space, which is obviously a market that is growing pretty rapidly right now in terms of therapeutics with the GLP-1 space. But before that, there was this need to address the root cause versus really the downstream impacts of obesity. And one of the in our view and our approach around demand-driven innovation, we often are talking to end users. We're always trying to innovate together versus for. And we are talking to clinicians, and this quote still links back to me now, even though I heard it 10 years ago, which was, obesity is one of the first things we see, but one of the last things we treat. And if you kind of marinate on that, it's pretty right, in that, a lot of times people get total hip, total joint surgery, but, are you addressing the cause that is actually creating it? And the therapeutics and the surgeries and the options, 5, 6, 7 years ago are different than today. But this was an area where we started to tackle a challenge statement of how do we better. The other issue around obesity is that it's not tracked because of that as well within the EMR. People just kind of, it's over probably about 50% of the US population is obese in some capacity. And so it was often kind of ignored because of that mass component around it. And so we actually brought together a life science company, an EMR, and a health system to essentially think about this and how do we better approach this from a population health standpoint. So we created essentially a population health tool for better tracking to guidelines. But the part that I think is unique in what we did was we really focused on the value prop for each group, right? For the life science company, it was how do we get more data, de-identified data to better understand these populations at large, so that we can continue to create pathways and therapeutics that were valuable. For the health system, it was how do you help our clinicians better address it quicker, more efficiently? And the EMR, it was how do we provide the right tools for our customers, and also grow our revenue. And so we were able to create this population health tool. It was implemented. It was then scaled by the EMR company, and actually they actually created uh, a contract with the life science partner to provide de-identified data back to the life science company, with permission from the health systems that they got on board and actually monetize that. So that's an example where we often go after these big hairy opportunities with that have multi partners that I think a lot of people shy away from.
Awesome. Great examples there. So just looking, at time, we got about
Yep.
10 minutes left here as we're going to do some audience Q&A in a minute. So feel free to put some questions in the chat. We'll get to those as I wrap up, one or two questions here. So talked all about 1110. Great job sort of, seeing the problems and helping shepherd that innovation through. Maybe just tell us quickly just the acquisition side of things now. Like, hey, what was that process like? How did that come about? And sort of, where does that put you guys now with what you originally started with?
Yeah, let me start, and then Caleb, maybe you take the how the business
Yep.
changed. But we actually went out looking to raise capital, not to sell. Like we were we had been growing very well every year. We'd been making money. We were very intentional about making sure it was a scalable business model. But we went out to raise capital to scale. And we frankly didn't like a lot of the firms that we met that were looking to make minority investment, and not in a bad way. We just felt that it was kind of dumb capital. Like we were going to get an investment, but we didn't really see synergies between that investment. And we ended up meeting a private equity firm, Renovis Capital. They're one of the best service-based private equity firms, frankly, in the world. We met a sponsor with Clinical Mind who I really just hit it off with the CEO. I felt like we complemented each other well. And frankly, she wanted Caleb and I to be part of the leadership team to grow the broader company. One of the broader lessons learned is that everything you do, there is a people component of it. And so we were so intentional about building the culture and getting the right team and the people on the bus, where people were passionate about healthcare innovation, where people had the skills to kind of facilitate these innovative methods. And yeah, Caleb said Eddie was one of our favorite collaborators. He was very involved, but that's where we knew there was a match here, is that we found the right people that meshed with our culture, and we knew that we needed a partner like that to get to the next level. So it took about 7 months. It was a very rapid process. We were very, very fortunate because we've continued to grow. But it has changed a lot. I mean, our roles have changed, and I specifically have had to get used to not running and gunning, and I've had to get more intentional about what we say no to than what we say yes to. Like we're defined now more on where we focus and what we say no to, and not the other way around. But Caleb, I know that's a good place for you to pick up on how it's changed here.
Yeah, I think I mean, just building on what James said, like we're now part of a 330 person PE backed company, very different than a 35 person strategy consulting firm. And so now we're much larger. We have 4 service lines: strategy, medcoms, learning solutions, technology. James and myself now have to think more broadly, understand different areas. As James mentioned, as entrepreneurs, like I think what binded me and James was that we like to grow things. And so it shifted from growing a company to that was, from the ground up to how do you optimize what's something that's already there, right? And then enhance it. And to James's point, it's kind of what you say no to. We've embraced it. Our team has embraced it. We're more process driven, more metric focused than we were. Actually, some of the things that we were doing, I would largely recommend to folks to keep that kind of diligence even in a smaller company because some of the processes that we actually brought on as a smaller component are being leveraged across the whole company, which is pretty cool to see. But I think that the same, like the type of business we're doing in Woven Strategy is the same as what we just talked about with 1110. The types of projects we're doing across the ecosystem, they acquired us for who we were, and didn't want to change us, which is why we felt a good fit there. So nothing's changed in terms of what we're doing. But it's just added on way more clients really quickly that we can go tap into, which is great. And then other smart people that are bringing a different type of perspective. But again, like our focus, James and my focus has always been on culture, our team through this transition and really around the mission to change the, healthcare industry and accelerate innovation.
Yeah.
Love to hear that. Still, always the importance of team and culture and the people that you're working with on
Always.
both sides. Couple questions coming in from the chat
Yeah.
throughout to you guys. What are your thoughts broadly in sort of the Atlanta health tech landscape of what's working or what does Atlanta need to do to keep improving as a player in that space?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we benefited so much from being in Atlanta, and something I failed to mention is, Eddie, who is now with Portal Innovations and used to be with Metro Atlanta Chamber, was with the Emory Healthcare Innovation Hub as we concepted that concept with Emory. And so the ecosystem here is, it's incestual. I mean, it is, once you get to know everybody, everybody kind of wants to help. But more broadly, Atlanta is in a very, very unique spot when it comes to healthcare and life sciences because we have the CDC here. We are a global destination for health and wellness. And, so we have a lot of unique assets here, and we need to continue digging into those assets to find out what makes us unique. But we have had the CDC at speakers at our events, or we facilitated connections with our clients to some of these global health initiatives that we have going on in Atlanta. And I think there is really, really something special with that makes us super unique. I would say we probably need our anchor institutions like Emory, like the CDC, like Grady, Piedmont. We need to really dig into them and figure out how we solve their problems, improve those economic models, and they need entrepreneurs to step in. And so I would just encourage everybody to kind of continue to build those relationships. I mean, there's probably people on this call from all those institutions. Start small, understand people's processes and workflows and where they see a need for innovation. And then that can scale to the rest of the nation.
Yeah. So just time coming up here, one more question and then we'll sort of, wrap up. You've talked about a lot of different things about, passion and trust and the people component of things. Any other sort of, lessons learned from entrepreneurs here, either from, things that were helping you be successful or mistakes you made that we haven't touched on yet that you want to leave folks with?
Yeah, Caleb, you go first.
Yeah, I can go first. I mean, a couple that have kind of I've grown to kind of appreciate more. I mean, James hit on the say no faster. So kind of every yes can dilute your focus. And so that's something that I think we've done well. Sometimes could improve at other times. Say surround yourself with complementary skill sets. So that's something, James and I came from different backgrounds. We have different approaches to things, but we have a healthy debate often. And so I think, and even some of our other co-founders and people on our team, we've surrounded ourselves with, folks that have different types of degrees, several folks on our team from a public health standpoint, even though we're working on the commercial side a lot of times. And so surround yourself with complementary skill sets. And then the last thing I would say is just invest in relationships with your customers, with your own internal team. It's not just revenue at the end of the day. As I mentioned earlier, trust is the currency in healthcare, and relationships drive that.
Yeah, I'll overlay AT with kind of three or four things. So I wrote these out so I would know, one is be interested before being interesting. So always listen first and ask good questions. It's very, very important to kind of come with that as you're an entrepreneur and you're in this vulnerable state. Second is, zoom out during the hard moments and really enjoy the process. I will share very vulnerable that I had many, many conversations where I thought I needed to come to those buttoned up. And, AT, even with you, I thought I needed to give some grandiose update of how we were doing. I really wish I would have zoomed out and said, this is hard. This is what I think we're doing good. This is what I think we're not doing good. I wish I would have invited the community in to be part of that journey with me because everybody does want to help and everybody wants to build bridges. And that is what's so rewarding. And the last thing is, really, your company or your culture is your company. So you need to invest very intentionally in your culture and the people and skills are important, but making sure you have the right people on the bus from a values perspective and what you care about and where you're trying to get, that's really important. And building the team and building the culture is the hardest part about building a business, but it's certainly the most rewarding and impactful. So those are just some things that have been great. And certainly, last thing to Atlanta Ventures, who has just been building community and building bridges and just launching rockets, ever since y'all opened the Tech Village back in, 16, 17, 18, whatever that was. We're just so grateful to you and everything you do, because this is just a great platform and Atlanta is very lucky to have you all.
Well, awesome. Well, I love that about the culture. One of the things we always talk about internally is that there's a lot of things you can't control in life and in business, but the culture of your firm is 100% in your control. And when you spend the time to do that right, a lot of great things can happen. Well, cool. James, Caleb, thank you so much for all the great stories you're sharing about, getting something started, onto acquisition, a lot of the great lessons around trust and passion. And I like that saying no faster, and building the culture. So hopefully people got some good takeaways there. Hopefully you met somebody new here today or got connected with somebody. But, we're around here in the ecosystem, work out of the Atlanta Tech Village. We've got some upcoming events that JC will share. We got a office hours coming up May 8th. Feel free to join us. Ask us any questions you want. Catherine, JC, and I will be on there to respond. We've got some healthcare resources. So if you missed any past meetups, you can go watch them. If you're a healthcare company, we're happy to list you on our site for people to see you and find you as investors or others are coming into town. And we'll probably do next one of these sometime over the summer. So with that, it's 10 o'clock. Caleb, James, thank you so much and hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks all.
Yeah. Bye.
Great
Thank
day.
you. Bye.